Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving straight into a fascinating sermon that completely turns one of the most famous biblical stories ever told, the parable of the prodigal son, totally on its head. If you think you already know this story inside and out, well, get ready, because the historical source material we're unpacking today reveals a meaning that is radically different from the simple, classic morality tale we're all used to hearing.
So consider this. What if the story of the prodigal son isn't actually about the son at all? It's a pretty provocative thought, right? As you'll see, this ancient narrative has a shocking historical subtext that would have literally made its original audience gasp out loud. To really grasp this parable, the source argues we've got to look right past that rebellious younger brother and focus entirely on the actions of the father.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. The scandalous historical context. 2. The younger son's rebellion. 3. The older son's pride. 4. The father's humiliation. And finally, 5. Living as free sons. Let's get into it.
Section 1. The scandalous historical context.
To truly understand this parable, we first have to set the scene. Jesus is sitting down to eat with tax collectors, and the religious leaders of the day, the Pharisees, are absolutely deeply offended by this. And why is that? Well, because in this era, tax collectors weren't just your annoying local government workers, they were considered subhuman traitors. They essentially engaged in legal theft, coercing extra money from their fellow Jews just to line their own pockets. To the Pharisees, these guys were even worse than Gentiles.
Because of this deep-seated hatred, the Pharisees look at Jesus sharing a meal with these men, and they start grumbling. In their eyes, sharing a meal wasn't just, a friendly gesture. It was seen as a direct endorsement of this horrific betrayal. And it's in response to this extremely tense standoff that Jesus actually tells the parable of the two sons to set the record straight.
Which brings us to Section 2, the younger son's rebellion.
The sermon explains that the very first character introduced, the younger son, is a direct representation of those reviled tax collectors. And man, his story is a brutal downward spiral. First, he demands his inheritance while his father is still alive. By doing this, he's effectively saying to his dad's face, "I wish you were dead." He squanders all that wealth, and when the money completely runs out, he's forced to feed pigs for a Gentile. Now, for a Jewish man, this meant reducing himself to a status literally lower than the pigs themselves. He is starving to death.
But the absolutely crucial point here is what happens next. The sermon demythologizes a really common assumption. When the younger son decides to return to his father, it is absolutely not out of love or some deep, true repentance. No, it's a calculated survival tactic. He just wants a job as a servant so he doesn't starve. He's planning out this whole spoken confession simply to negotiate a meal ticket.
Moving on to Section 3. The older son's pride.
So if the younger son represents the tax collectors, the older son clearly represents the Pharisees. And there's a really stark difference between these two brothers. The younger brother commits sins of action, actively throwing away his status for fleeting selfish pleasures. But the older brother, he commits sins of inaction. Right at the start of the story, he is entirely passive. As the oldest son, his cultural duty was to heal the rift in his family. Instead, he just sits back and does nothing, throwing away his own status purely for the sake of pride.
And this inaction reveals an incredibly twisted perspective. The older brother doesn't view his relationship with his father as a family dynamic at all. He views it like a cold contract between a master and a servant. He thinks because he followed all the rules, he's basically a superior servant who deserves a big reward, totally missing the entire point of what it means to actually be a son.
Section 4. The father's humiliation.
Now this is where the narrative builds to its climax, and it takes a radical, culturally shocking turn. The source reveals a vital piece of context here. In this ancient society, great men do not run. It was highly shameful for an older patriarch to sprint anywhere. Yet, when the father sees his starving, traitorous son approaching the village, he knows the villagers will likely stone the boy. So, what does he do? He humiliatingly hikes up his robes and he runs. He completely absorbs the shame in order to rescue his son. Seeing this overwhelming, completely unearned compassion changes the younger son's heart on the spot, inspiring genuine repentance. He drops his whole negotiation tactic, and the father immediately restores him to full sonship, not servitude. He actually orders his servants to bring 3 specific items: his own best robe, a family ring, and sandals. These items clearly, legally, mark him as a free son, not a slave.
This all leads the father to throw a massive feast. But here's the critical question we have to ask. Who is the feast actually celebrating? The older brother absolutely refuses to attend, completely insulting his father in the process, because he genuinely thinks the father is unfairly rewarding the younger brother's terrible behavior.
But the older brother is entirely wrong here. The feast is not celebrating the younger son's sins at all. The celebration is entirely about the father. It's a celebration of the father humiliating himself, absorbing the shame, and running to rescue his broken son. The son was totally passive in his own salvation. The father did all the heavy lifting. And the incredible grace of the father doesn't just stop there. Just as he ran out to the younger son, the father humbles himself yet again to go outside the feast to speak to the resentful older son. He offers him the exact same unearned grace, calling him son and reminding him all that is mine is yours. Think about it. Both sons wanted to be servants, but the father, he insists on making them sons.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, Living as Free Sons.
The sermon now transitions to its ultimate theological application, drawing a direct, powerful parallel to the broader Christian concept of Christ's sacrifice. Just as the earthly father shamed himself and ran out to save his sons, the sermon argues that Christ humbled himself, stepping down from his high status to eat with tax collectors and to be shamed on a cross to restore mankind. The Father's righteousness in this story is a direct mirror of Christ's righteousness.
So what does this actually mean for us? Well, the sermon provides some really empowering takeaways. Because your status is entirely secured by what the Father has already done and not by your own perfect track record, you don't have to live in fear anymore. You are totally free. You are commanded to use your secured status to serve your neighbors, even at the cost of your own comfort, to let go of the fear of failure, and to live boldly in your calling.
The message is clear. Go and try boldly. Go and fail boldly. The reality is, someday all our earthly possessions, our energy, and our time will run out. But because your place at the table is absolutely guaranteed by grace, you don't have to hoard your wealth or obsessively protect your pride. You have the ultimate safety net, allowing you to risk failure in order to deeply serve the people around you.
We're going to end on this final provocative thought because I think it perfectly summarizes the core dichotomy of everything we've unpacked today. Will you live trying to earn your place at the table like a nervous servant, constantly keeping score of your actions and inactions, or will you accept the unearned grace of the Father and step into the bold, fearless freedom of a son? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.